the bishop had reported that it had become necessary to move Ridsdale from Mortlake. Now, to your knowledge, he then went to the Catholic Inquiry Centre in Sydney, is that right?
Correct, yes.
And on coming back from there, he was then appointed in Horsham.
Yes, correct.
And we can pick it up there with the next minute is at tab 46. Now you'll see this is a minute 21 June 1988. By then, of course, you're no longer secretary, is that right?
Sorry, what was that?
By then, you are no longer secretary to the bishop?
Correct, yes.
And so you reflected here as having been present at the meeting as a consultor, would that be right?
Correct, yes.
And if one scrolls down slightly, you'll see under the heading personnel, it says Reverend G. Ridsdale. It was reported that it became necessary to move out of the parish ministry. Now, by then, of course, Ridsdale's offending against children. Now, by then, of course.
Sorry, what is this? 1988?
June of 1988. Yes.
Yes. 88. Well, I don't know whether I could say it was well known among the consultors, because it's not right to read back. In the documentation, we read that he told the parish priest of Horsham that he needed to move on because his past was catching up with him. And I presume that was reported I can't remember.
Now, do you have any memory of what was said at this meeting which gave rise to this recordal here that it was reported that it had become necessary to move out of the parish ministry?
Yes.
This recordal here that it was reported that it had become necessary to move out of the parish ministry.
Yes, no memory of the meeting at all.
And at tab 47, there's the letter from the bishop. Just a week or so later, in the action on which we agreed, and hereby withdraw your priestly faculties connected with the public celebration of the Eucharist, of the sacraments, and of preaching the word of God. And then it goes on, and you'll see towards the foot of the page that Ridsdale apparently signed that as noted and willingly accepted on the 2nd of July. Do you see that?
Yes, yes.
Now, were you, did you know at that time that when Ridsdale's faculties were withdrawn, did you know that they had been withdrawn?
Well, I can't recall hearing it or whatever, but obviously I presume that letter would have been shared with me, or the information that he was no longer to function as a priest. I presume that was shared with me, but when it might have happened or what was the context, I cannot remember.
Well, does it not follow from the report in the meeting the week earlier, where we saw it was reported that it has become necessary to remove him out of the parish ministry. It would not flow from that his faculties will be withdrawn, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily so, I think.
But you...
I mean, well, I don't know if you want to sort of, maybe these are silly examples, but he might have been, not him, but a priest could be unwell and say, well, he has to be withdrawn from parish ministry. It doesn't automatically follow that his faculties would then be restricted.
You accept, of course, that the statement that he needs to withdraw from parish ministry, of course, raises the question as to why. That's a question which would have come to your mind at least. Do you accept that?
Oh, yes.
Yes. And are you saying you don't have any recollection as to whether there was any explanation as to why he was being withdrawn from the parish ministry? Yes. And are you saying you don't have any recollection as to whether there was any explanation?
There.
And as I understood you to have said, but just to check, that you believe you would have known at or about the time that his faculties as a priest were withdrawn, you would have known that?
I would believe so, yes.
And then we know that from there, Ridsdale went to and spent some time in White Cliffs in far western New South Wales for about 18 months. Were you aware of that at the time?
I can't remember really whether I was or not.
New South Wales for about 18 months. Were you aware of that at the time? Problems that had arisen in relation to Ridsdale whilst he was at White Cliffs.
I'm not sure I was aware at the time, but then subsequently in some documentation it is said that the parish priest wasn't happy with his activities there, I think, if I remember correctly.
Yes, well, I'll take you to it. It's at tab 84, page 11, towards the foot of the page. You'll see that your answer, no, we don't see the question or the first part of your answer, but you then say, regarding White Cliffs, one wouldn't know what went on there. I have a vague recollection of, I don't know whether from the parish priest at White Cliffs, but a report coming through that he was not happy with Jerry Ridsdale. I don't know if it was the parish priest or visiting priest up there. That's to what you were referring, is it?
Yes, yes.
And are we to understand you as saying that you became what you were referring, is it?
Yes, yes.
And coming through of someone not being happy with Jerry Ridsdale at the time that Ridsdale was still at White Cliffs, or only afterwards?
Sorry, what was that? Was it at the time he was there or afterwards? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking as to your knowledge of what you told Mr. O'Connor, which is recorded in the passage we've just looked at. You obviously knew it in 1993. I'm asking, did you know it when Ridsdale was still at White Cliffs, or did you learn of it only sometime subsequently?
Excuse me, well, I can't remember getting any report about him while he was at White Cliffs, but certainly I'm aware of it when I had the interview.
Bishop, I'm discerning that you're struggling to hear me. Can we offer you some assistance?
But certainly I'm aware of it when I had the interview.
Bishop, I'm discerning that you're struggling to hear me. Can we offer you some assistance on hearing with some headphones? Would that assist you? Would you like to try it?
Well, these funny things down here.
You'll be assisted in a moment. I think there are probably some better ones than those.
I have the habit of just poking my ear out when people... I don't adjust, just put them on.
No,
I don't adjust, just tending to be too loud.
is that better now, Bishop?
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, if you would be showing tab 105 of the Ridsdale bundle. Now, this is in March 1994, and it's a letter in your handwriting, am I correct?
Correct, yes.
And it's addressed to Gerald Ridsdale, is that right?
Correct, yes.
And so just to place it in time, it's approximately a year after Ridsdale was charged, a bit more than a year after Ridsdale was charged, but at a time that you remained a consultor, is that right?
Correct, yes.
And it's also at a time that you were the Vicar General.
Yes, correct.
In fact, if we just look at the top of the page, we'll see that it's the Vicar General's stationery. Do you see that you're writing on?
Yes, that's right.
Yes. Now, you're writing to Ridsdale, and you say, my efforts to phone you yesterday were unsuccessful. Well, perhaps I'll stop there for a moment. Do you know where Ridsdale was at this time? Where were you writing to him?
Well, no, I can't remember just where he was at this particular time.
Yes, and then you go on, you say, thanks for your note. I hope the trip to New South Wales goes well. And then you say, the Australian Church needs some place to offer long-term accommodation to people in your situation, as well as BPB and Paul DR plus others. Now, firstly, you know who the reference to BPB is, don't you?
Well,
Oh,
no.
well, you'll find it on that list. It's about
Yes, I've got it.
sixth name down, right?
Yes.
And that's another offending priest, right?
Correct, yes.
And the reference to Paul DR is obviously a reference to Paul David Ryan.
That's right, yes.
Now, what is it that you had in mind there about a long-term accommodation for people in this situation? I mean, what situation?
Excuse me. Well, I presume they're all under a cloud of suspicion at this time. And, excuse me. And it's, well, a discussion, I know, I don't know whether it's at this time, but certainly later on, but I think at this time. And it's, well, a discussion, I know these people are cared for, but also, what should I say, not let loose on the world. They should be have accommodation and supervision. That's my... Not let loose on the world. They should be have accommodation and supervision. That's my vague understanding. This one under a cloud of, yes. I'm not sure it's all child sex abuse, but difficulties in coping with ministry.
Well, it's more specific than that, isn't it? Because you're addressing, and certainly the examples you use, BPB and Paul David Ryan, they are offenders against children.
Oh, yes, I wouldn't deny that.
And the term of this accommodation that you're referring to, that's, I suppose, and correct me if I'm wrong, awaiting to see whether they are charged and convicted. I suppose, and correct me if I'm wrong, awaiting to see whether they... Vicar General, did you ever pass on information or complaints with regard to priests offending against children to the police?
Did I do so?
Yes.
No.
And did you understand yourself to be under a legal obligation, by which I'm referring to canon law obligation, and yourself to be under a legal obligation, by which I'm referring to canon law obligation not to
Be restricting me. In all of these situations, the police already knew, as far as I can gather.
Well, they knew in relation to the cases that had been brought to their attention, but you would accept that there were many other cases of complaints and so on that they didn't know about.
Probably so, but I didn't know about them.
Many other cases of complaints and so on that they didn't know about.
Probably so, but
Reverting to the question of any constraints on you with regard to information that you may have had in your possession, you understand, of course, I'm not limiting my question to the Code of Canon Law 1983 itself. I'm asking the question on a broader basis also to pick up other instruments or sources of authority of canon law.
as I understand it, you're asking me whether there are any other constraints apart from the Code of Canon Law. My answer would be no.
So, not to your knowledge and understanding.
Correct.
I'd like to move on and deal with the question of Paul David Ryan. As we ascertained earlier, you were in Washington, District of Columbia, that is August 1977 to the end of 1978, is that right?
Correct, yes.
And Ryan was in Maryland, USA, February 1977 to May 1978.
Yes.
Now, if I can show you in the Ryan bundle, tab 10. Now, if I can show you in the Ryan bundle, tab 10. You'll see that this is a letter from the Bishop to Paul David Ryan. If one looks to the bottom of the page, as you'll be shown in a moment, you'll see this Bishop Malkern's signature. Do you see that?
Yes, that's right.
And it's on the 19th of August, 1977. So that's at about the time you were going to the USA, right?
Correct, yes.
And you'll see that in the second paragraph, which is conveniently highlighted, the Bishop says to Paul David Ryan, the main reason for writing in haste now is to be in touch with you before Brian Finnegan gets to the States. He's due to arrive about August 31st, though I haven't the details of his flight, and so on, and we'll pick it up where it's highlighted again. In reply to your question, does Brian know anything? Details of his flight, and so on, and we'll pick it up where it's highlighted again in detail. He will be working with me as successor to Adrian in 1979 and will thus be in a confidential position. Now, firstly, as successor to Adrian, That would be as the Bishop's secretary, am I right?
Correct, yes.
Now, what do you recall of what it is that the Bishop told you about Ryan prior to you going to the United States?
I can't recall just what he said, but am I allowed to refer to subsequent correspondence?
If that assists you, yes.
Sorry?
If that assists you, yes.
Oh, yes. Well, in correspondence between the Bishop and Father Harvey, there's recognition there that Paul Ryan seemed to be almost paranoid about the fact that I might have information regarding why he was over there. And so Harvey and the Bishop sort of, as I understand it, said that it was better for me to be given some information. And so the Bishop gave that information, but I can't recall what he actually said. But I thought that it was seeing that, putting two and two together. Harvey was an expert in same-sex relationships, and that it was seeing that, putting two and two together. Harvey was an expert. And then later on, or maybe around the same time, Bishop Mulcairns to Harvey mentioned once, if not twice, I have informed Brian Finnegan about Paul David Ryan, but I have not gone into great detail.
Yes. So when you say as to what you thought, you're saying that's what you thought now, looking back at the correspondence, is that right?
Yes.
When you said I put two and two together and thought that it was about same-sex relationships, that the time at which you thought that was in a recent time looking at the correspondence, am I right?
Well, yes, I think so. But as I tried to say earlier, knowing that Harvey was supposed to be an expert in same-sex relationships, I suppose that when the Bishop told me, and whenever it was, and what he said, I would have been able to come to the conclusion that this concerns same-sex relationship problems.
Well, you see, carrying on in that paragraph that we were reading in the last sentence, the Bishop says to Ryan, naturally, I'm quite confident of Brian's discretion and the fact that he will maintain confidentiality on the matter. Now, it's obvious, isn't it, that whatever it is that you were told, it was a matter of confidentiality and importance to that it be kept confidential to Ryan. You accept that?
Confidential, yes, but when you say that, it doesn't mean to say that I wasn't barred from mentioning it to Paul David Ryan.
Yes, but certainly you would have been barred from mentioning it to other people.
Yeah, well, I would have thought Paul David Ryan.
Yes, but certainly you would have been barred from mentioning it to other people.
Yeah, well, I would have thought that's a natural.
To assist you. So we've established it was something of such a nature that it would be important to Ryan that it be kept confidential, right?
Yes. It was very important to him, apparently, that none of this information was shared. Even he seemed to be hesitant about me knowing the basic facts, as it were.
Yes, and if you look at the next paragraph, again helpfully highlighted, it says, I have given Brian some indication of the problem. He would certainly have wondered about the time you are spending in Washington otherwise. Now, looking at that, does it assist you to remember what it is that the Bishop indicated to you as to the nature of the problem?
No, it doesn't help me at all.
To the nature of the problem.
No, it doesn't help me at all.
And so perhaps if I can put it like this, at that time, did you know whether it had become known to the bishop that Ryan had a problem with regard to offending against children or adolescents?
Homosexual activity, but it wasn't children as I would understand it. I mean, the initial reports, which weren't given to me, I just read it and in subsequent correspondence, was when he was in the seminary training.
Yes, I've read the correspondence. The question was directed at your knowledge. In other words, at the time that you went to the USA, are you able to say whether you knew, whether the bishop knew that there was a problem with regard to Ryan offending against children or adolescents?
I did not know.
And if we have a look at tab 20 in that bundle. Have a look at tab 20 in that bundle. You'll recognize it as a letter from you. I can show you your signature at the end if you'd like to see it, or do you accept that's your letter?
No, it's definitely my letter.
And so you're writing to the bishop from Caldwell Hall, Catholic University of America, 21 March 1978.
Correct.
And if I can take you to page 4, at the foot of towards the foot of the page, you to page 4. It's to be progressing well. Do you see that paragraph?
Yes.
And it says in January I sent him a copy of Clergy Moves and so on. Then it says in the letter I mentioned that I never have the opportunity of seeing him privately, but I was interested in his welfare and hoped that the special help he was receiving. Mentioned that I never have the opportunity of seeing him privately, but now, what is the special help that he was receiving that you refer to in that letter?
The counselling or therapy from Father Harvey.
And did you know as to the specifics of the problem with regard to which he was the specifics of the problem with regard to which he was requiring special help? Did you have any knowledge as to the specifics of Brian's specialist in same-sex relationships? That's obviously rather a broad idea. Did you have any? And if I could have you shown tab 32. Now, this is a note of the bishop where he says that John Keane called him on 18 June 1978 to talk about Paul Ryan. So it says that John Keane called him on 18 June 1978 to talk about Paul Ryan.
Oh, I have read it, but I wouldn't say I'm familiar with it.
Now, you didn't take up your position as Bishop Secretary until January of 1979, is that right?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Now, this note, you know who John Keane is, I take it?
Oh, yes,
The priest of the diocese.
Yes.
And he's the bishop has here recorded that he received a call from John Keane,
Yes.
the priest of the diocese.
Yes.
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 And and the details are there about the complainant's son allegedly being involved with Paul. Do you know, are you able to say when the fact of this report to the bishop came to your knowledge?
No, I'm not able to say that.
Well, was it sometime back in the past, at the time that you were serving in the diocese, or was it only in a recent time? Well, was it sometime back in the past?
Preparing for this hearing, I've never heard before that John Kane had this report.
And if we can look at tab 43. This is one of your minutes as secretary, am I right? You'll see it says, Reverend Paul Ryan, Bishop Malkerns reported. You'll see it says, with him on his return. Do you have any recollection of any report at that meeting beyond what's actually written there in the minute?
No further memory about it.
And the next minute is at tab 45. Again, that's your minute, is it?
Correct, yes.
13 May 1980. And further down the same page, one will see the bishop stated, Father Paul Ryan is available for an appointment. Do you see that?
Yes, yes.
And then on the third page, that's ringtail 175. Further down, adjacent to the heading staffing, you will see that it said that assistants, Warrnambool, Reverend P. Ryan. Do you see that?
Yes.
Do you have any recollection of what was said or reported at that meeting with regard to the appointment of Ryan?
No memory at all.
Now, I'd like to show you part of the transcript of an interview with Ryan himself, which was tendered in these proceedings previously. It's exhibit 28-2. I think it's tab 124. Yes, tab 124. Right, so this, as I said, was an interview, private hearing with Ryan himself on 25 February of this year. And if I can ask that you be taken to page 875. Now, you'll see at line 13, there's a question put to Ryan which starts Bishop Malkerns. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then, I beg your pardon, line 13 is, the question is, had you spoken to Bishop Malkerns before 1995 about your attraction to adolescent boys? Do you see that?
Yes.
And then you'll see at line 18, Ryan said, no, not specifically. And then the chair asked about not specifically, and the answer was ultimately given at line 25, no. And then at line 27, he was asked, had you had a conversation with his secretary, that's the bishop's secretary, about adolescent boys before that time? So that's before 1995. And the answer came, Father Finnegan, I talked to Father Finnegan about it, I think, yes. And I'll just show you what he says further, and then I'll come back and ask you about that. Because he says, well, the other one may be a separate incident, so I'll come back to it separately. What do you say with regard to Ryan having said that he spoke to you about him having a problem with adolescent boys before 1995?
Well, I have no recollection of it at all, and I would think it most unusual that I'd be speaking to him or anyone else about their sexual preferences.
Well, if I can take you to page 877. You'll see at line 14, Ryan's asked, when you say you don't recall as such, as far as you knew, the authorities in the diocese, including the bishop, knew by the 1980s of your activities with adolescent boys, didn't they? And Ryan said yes. And then the question was, as far as you were aware, they knew by when, 1981 or 1982, or when would they have known? He says probably 1981, 1982, about that period. And then it goes a little bit further, and at line 33, he's asked, did you tell Finnegan? And his answer was, I may have, I don't recall as such, but he would have been a person I would have trusted to talk to. So Ryan regarded you in that way as being someone whom he trusted to talk to about these matters. Does that assist you at all as to whether he didn't talk to them to you and when?
No, I suppose it's nice to hear that he trusted me, but I don't have any recollection or recall of him talking to me about such matters.
And I can show you tab 47. This is in the Ryan bundle. This is a minute of the meeting in January in 1985. Is that your handwriting once again?
It is, yes.
And if we scroll down a little bit further, you'll see there in the middle of the screen now, it says, Father Paul D. Ryan Warrnambool has applied for study leave in the USA for 2 to 5 years. It was decided to grant the request. Do you have any recollection as to what was reported or discussed beyond what is recorded in the minute?
No, I have no memory.
And I can show you tab 57. is now 30 December 1988, as I read it. And you now a member of the committee and recorded as present. You see that?
Yes, that's right.
And if we look down further down the page, it says a bit further, the following appointments were decided. And next to Penshurst, it says Reverend P. Ryan. Do you recall when Ryan was appointed to Penshurst?
I don't recall it, no.
And I take it you don't recall any discussion or anything particular about this meeting?
That's correct.
Now, did you receive a report of Ryan offending against an adolescent whilst he was at Penshurst?
No, I didn't receive any report about him.
Now, you were on study leave, as I understand it, for a period in 1991, is that right?
Correct, yes.
I have it, having picked it up from the minutes, at least in the period March to May 1991. Do you have it more? Do you have it to hand or to your knowledge what the period was that you were away on study leave?
Oh, yes, from August 1990 to August 1991.
And were you abroad in that period?
Yes, I was in Ottawa, Canada.
And during that time, Ryan resigned from Penshurst following a complaint. We know that. When did you learn of that, of Ryan's resignation?
Well, I cannot recall when I heard it.
And did it at some point come to your knowledge that Ryan had resigned because of a complaint made about him at Penshurst?
Yes, I've read about that, some documentation here.
Did it come to your knowledge, to your recollection, back at the time that you were serving in the diocese?
No. Somewhere here, a mother complained that Paul David had invited her son to have a bath, and she complained, and I think Paul David Ryan somewhere claims that she came to me, which is just totally untrue.
And you know that at least because that period you were in Ottawa, is that right?
Well, I don't know, just the sequence of time, but I just don't know.
And if I show you the minute at tab 76, which is the minute of 19 December 1991, and you recorded as being present as the Vicar General. Do you see that?
Yes.
So this is now a couple of months after your return from Ottawa.
Yes.
And one sees 2/3 of the way down the page, adjacent to the heading Staffing, it says Father P.D. Ryan has returned to Australia, and the Bishop reported that Father Ryan is available for a placement. Do you have any recollection of any discussion or report at that meeting beyond what's recorded there?
No memory at all.
And over the page, it's recorded that he was then appointed assistant priest in Ararat. Do you have any recollection of that?
No, no recollection.
And I can show you tab 78. You'll see this is a letter from the Bishop, 29 January 1992, to a Father, Reverend Father Peter Lechner in New Mexico. And in particular, if I can take you to the third page, that's ringtail 54, a little bit further down, you will see that in that paragraph in the middle of the screen, the Bishop is reporting that an unfortunate complication arose in the last couple of weeks. Just to remind you that this letter is 29 January 92. In the newspaper coverage of the trial of a child care worker. Do you see that?
Yes, yes.
Who was accused of paedophilia. The barrister for the defense made the claim in court that the accused, when 14, had confessed to a priest that he was attracted to boys. The priest told him not to worry. The priest would visit the family home and was asked to care for the accused and his brother one weekend. The priest got into the bath, invited the accused into the bath and molested him. The priest was not named in the newspaper in report, but certainly the incident relates to poor David Ryan. Now, I take it that the fact of that report came to your attention at or about the time that it was published.
I have no recollection of that.
Well, accepting that the report didn't name Ryan himself, but it does appear from this, what we have the bishop saying, that it identified that it was a priest of the diocese. That you would accept is the sort of information that would have got to you by its scandalous nature.
I can't say that would be follow.
And you have no recollection one way or the other, is that it?
Correct, that's right.
And at tab 81, there's the consulta's minute, 1 December 1992. Again, recording you present as Vicar General. Do you see that?
Yes.
And just below halfway, it says that Bishop Mulcairns mentioned that Father BPB and PD Ryan will not be involved in diocesan placements in 1993. Do you have any recollection of the bishop's report?
No recollection at all.
So you don't have any recollection as to what explanation, if any, the bishop gave as to why these priests would not be involved in diocesan placements in 1993?
There's no memory of it.
So Ryan was effectively placed on administrative leave if thereafter, is that right?
Well, I suspect so. I just can't remember.
Yes, if I can show you tab 88. So you'll see June 1993. Again, you're recorded as present at the meeting of the consultors.
Yes.
And if I can show you page 2. You'll see there it says, Father P.D. Ryan has had all his faculties removed with the exception of being able to celebrate Mass privately without giving any appearance of having an ecclesiastical appointment in office or office. The bishop explained to the consultors the reasons for this course of action. Now, do you have any recollection as to what reasons were explained by the bishop as to the course of action that he took in relation to Ryan?
I have no memory at all.
Now, if we can address the question of the priest who goes by the pseudonym BPB, you know, of course, who I'm referring to.
Yes, I've got it.
And if I can show you tab 2. you will see that this is a note of the bishop. If you can just go to the bottom so this bishop can see. Bishop Malkerns has signed it. And back to the top, you'll see that he records for himself that a certain person, a parishioner of a named parish, called to see him on the July the 7th, 1989, and then set out some detail with regard to BPB making sexual advances towards the person's son. Now, you were not yet the Vicar General at that time. Did the Bishop report this to you at that time?
No, I have no memory of it.
And at tab 5, there's the minute of the meeting a few weeks later on the 26th of July 1989. You are recorded as being present as a consultant. Do you see that?
Yes.
And on the third page, that's ringtail 327, at the top of the page, you will see adjacent to the heading staffing, it says, the parish of, and it's been redacted, became vacant following the resignation of BPB. Do you recall that parish becoming vacant following the resignation of BPB?
No, I have no memory of it.
And at tab 7, you will see there's the minute of the 20th of March 1990. Do you see that?
Yes, that's right.
And you recorded as being present.
Yes, that's right.
And if one has a look at the second page, it says that Father BPB was appointed assistant priest to a parish, the name of which has been redacted, effective Saturday, 31 March 1990. Do you have any memory of that?
No, no memory of it at all.
Your Honour, I will be a few more minutes. I'm in Your Honour's hands as to whether to
I
keep
will
going.
take the luncheon agenda.